Welcome to this podcast in the Inclusive Diving series. In this podcast, we will explore the complexities of determining an individual's suitability for scuba diving. It is not a yes or no decision but depends on many factors. So let's get started.
Many of us picture scuba diving as, this incredibly serene, almost meditative activity, exploring vibrant coral reefs, gliding alongside majestic marine life. It looks so peaceful, so effortless. But here's where it gets really interesting. It's actually rated as a hazardous sport. Accidents and, sadly, fatalities occur every year. Today, we're taking a deep dive into what it truly means to be fit to dive. It's far more complex than a simple yes or no, involving this fascinating interplay of personal health, environmental conditions, and, well, the human element.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is that determining fitness to dive isn't really a one-time decision. You don't just get a certificate and, that's it forever. Our main source today, Assessing Fitness for Scuba Diving, a medical guide by Dr. Mark Downs, really unpacks all the layers. Dr. Downs, he's conducted over 10,000 diving medicals, so he has this incredibly deep understanding of why it's an ongoing process. It's definitely not black and white.
Right. So our mission for you today is to give you a shortcut, really, to being well-informed on this crucial topic. Whether you're maybe thinking about diving yourself or just curious about how safety is assessed in these kinds of high-risk activities. Let's unpack this. So, okay, you've decided you want to learn to dive. What's the very first step in figuring out if you're medically fit, according to the sort of standard process?
Well, the initial process looks simple on the surface. You, as the student, you fill out health declaration form. If all the questions are answered satisfactorily, which basically means no yes responses to any health conditions listed, then you can actually self-certify.
Just like that.
Pretty much. But, and this is the important part, if there's any yes answer, then a physician's advice is required before you can do any in-water activity at all.
Okay, so doctor signs off, problem solved, right?
Yeah.
Is it really that straightforward?
Well, this raises a really important question, doesn't it? The assumption by many in the recreational diving industry is that this process works perfectly. You get a clear, fit, or unfit decision. But the reality, as Dr. Downs points out, is far from simple. And this kind of simplistic view can actually be discriminatory sometimes.
Discriminatory? How so?
Particularly towards those with disabilities. It might reduce the number of applicants who are ultimately past this fit when maybe they could dive safely with certain precautions. It's not always just a clear pass-fail.
Got it. So setting aside that complexity for a moment, what are the general medical red flags, the things that might immediately suggest someone just isn't fit to dive?
Generally speaking, the big ones are issues that could lead to altered consciousness underwater. That's obviously very dangerous. Also, disorders that inhibit the natural evolution of Boyle's law. That's basically about how gas expands in your lungs as you come up. If something stops that happening naturally, it's a major problem. And finally, conditions that might cause erratic or irresponsible behavior. Safety is paramount.
Okay. And who is actually signing off on these forms when a doctor's note is needed? Is any doctor qualified?
This is a really critical point Dr. Downs emphasizes. The Recreational Scuba Training Council, the RSTC, they state any doctor can issue the certificate. But think about it. Your GP, your general practitioner, they might have your full medical history, which is great, but they probably lack specific knowledge about diving medicine. The unique pressures, the environment.
Right, it's a specialized field.
Exactly. Conversely, a diving doctor, someone with that specific expertise, might not have access to your complete medical records. So there's this kind of information gap, potentially. There's a balance to be struck. Here in the UK, for instance, they prefer specific accredited diving doctors, people like HSE-approved medical examiners of divers or UKDMC medical referees. And there's another layer, too. GPs face issues with financial viability for doing these private diving medicals because of the indemnity insurance required.
It's complicated. So it definitely sounds like there's more to it than just getting a signature on a form. What about the instructor then? Where do they fit into this initial assessment? I imagine many people think they just teach the practical skills.
Yeah, that's a common misconception, and honestly, it's a dangerous one. Many instructors do believe they have no role in assessing medical fitness. They think that's the doctor's job, but they're wrong. While they obviously can't medically certify someone with problems, they absolutely have a professional duty of care to monitor fitness on the day.
Fitness on the day, what does that entail?
It means checking for things right there, right then. Like, does the student seem to have a bad cold or respiratory issues? Are there signs of alcohol or drug influence? Even things like, excessive anxiety or signs of panic before the dive even starts. An instructor who isn't paying attention to these things is frankly a danger, not just to their students, but to themselves too.
Okay, wow. So it's clearly not a simple checklist at all. If it's this dynamic assessment, the spectrum you mentioned, how do we actually define fitness to dive?
That's the core question, isn't it? Fitness is truly on a spectrum. It fluctuates, sometimes daily. It depends hugely on the characteristics of the specific dive you're planning. It also depends on the quality of the instructor, their experience, their patience. And of course, the diver's own medical background and even their attitude play a big part. It's very dynamic, not static at all.
Could you maybe break that down for us? What are the key factors contributing to this spectrum? Let's start with the diver themselves.
Sure. It really boils down to maybe three main areas. First, let's look at the diver's medical condition and personal characteristics. Okay, so medically, any condition that could lead to loss of consciousness underwater carries an incredibly high fatality risk. Think about that. Also, abnormal thought processes may be linked to some mental health issues. They can severely impair judgment and decision-making, which you rely on constantly when diving. Lung conditions are critical too. Anything that hinders the lungs coping with pressure changes, what we call barotrauma. And a really tricky one. The effects of medications underwater. They're largely unresearched. There are potential risks if your blood levels of a drug become too low or maybe even too high under pressure.
That's a lot on the medical side. What about personal characteristics?
Right. Beyond specific conditions, general physical fitness is vital. You're carrying heavy gear, getting in and out of the water, sometimes fitting against strong currents. Functional impairments, like, say, limb loss, obviously impact basic tasks needed for diving, though adaptations are often possible. Comfort in the water itself is paramount. If you're fundamentally uncomfortable, that can easily escalate into panic. And perhaps surprisingly crucial is attitude. A positive attitude, a genuine desire to succeed that significantly impacts a student's ability to learn and cope.
Okay, so the individual diver is definitely a huge piece of the puzzle, but you said the dive itself plays a role too.
Absolutely, and this is so important. All dives are not the same. You really have to get that. Think about the variables. Yeah. Difficult shore entries or boat exits, strong currents, poor visibility where you can barely see your buddy, greater depths.
Yeah, depths increase risks like decompression illness, right? Or just running out of air faster.
Exactly. And then you have overhead environments, things like exploring inside shipwrecks or caves. These prevent a direct, immediate ascent to the surface in an emergency. All these factors dramatically elevate the risk, so the required level of fitness goes up too. Someone might be perfectly fit for a calm, shallow, sunny reef dive,
but completely unfit for a deep, dark wreck penetration or a complex cave dive.
Precisely. The dive defines the required fitness level just as much as the diver does.
That makes sense. And the third piece you mentioned was the instructor. How do they fit into this dynamic picture beyond just that fitness on the day check?
Well, the instructor's own ability, their experience, even their teaching style and manner are hugely impactful. Patience is key. Having ample time for learning is crucial, especially if a student has some learning difficulties or perhaps anxiety about being underwater. Instructors need adaptive teaching styles. Can they cater to visual learners? Can they provide more supervision for someone who struggles with attention?
So smaller class sizes would probably help there.
Definitely. High staff-to-student ratios directly correlate with better instruction and higher success rates. Yes, it might cost more, but the safety and learning benefits are clear. And crucially, an instructor needs to be properly informed about a student's specific medical history or learning challenges so they know what to look out for and how to respond appropriately if something happens.
This really paints a picture of instructors needing to be much more than just, dive guides. They sound like they need to be pretty vigilant monitors of student health. What sort of additional useful skills does Dr. Downs recommend for them?
Yeah, this is where Dr. Downs' guide gets really practical and I think quite insightful for the industry. Beyond just teaching how to clear a mask or read a dive computer, he suggests instructors should be able to perform a range of basic medical checks themselves.
Checks? You mean things usually done by doctors or nurses?
Well, yes, but basic versions. These aren't necessarily complex diagnostic procedures, but simple monitoring skills.
Okay, like what? Can you give us some examples?
Sure. Think about checking blood pressure. High blood pressure, hypertension, can increase the risk of something called immersion pulmonary edema, or IPO.
That's the fluid in the lungs thing you mentioned.
Exactly. Or checking for low blood pressure. Hypotension, another one. Temperature. Recognizing fever, hyperthermia, Or more commonly in diving, hypothermia getting too cold. Divers with certain disabilities can be at higher risk for temperature regulation issues. Simple ear thermometers are recommended.
Okay, what else?
Peak flow rate. This measures how fast you can breathe out. It's really crucial for anyone with a history of respiratory issues, like asthma, to ensure their airways are clear enough for safe gas exchange and to avoid lung barotrauma. Remember that golden rule: never hold your breath. Then there's pulse oximetry, that little clip on the finger measuring blood oxygen saturation, SpO2, like a good general indicator of respiratory health, although cold fingers can sometimes affect the reading.
Useful checks. Any more?
Yes, blood glucose level. Absolutely essential if you have diabetic students. They need to maintain good blood sugar control, and the instructor should know they have hypo treatments like glucose gel or tablets readily available in case their sugar drops too low. Also, a quick 5-minute neuro exam. Just basic checks of coordination, eye movements, orientation. Really useful if you suspect someone might have decompression illness after a dive. Otoscopy, just looking in the ears with a simple otoscope. Ear barotrauma, pressure injuries are super common for novices. This helps decide if they can safely continue training that day. And finally, just basic circulation and respiratory exams. Listening to the chest, checking pulse, if a student complains of chest pain or shortness of breath. This isn't for diagnosis, but it provides vital information to pass on to emergency services if needed.
Wow, that's quite a list. So the takeaway here really seems to be that instructors, especially those aiming for a high standard of care, should be equipped not just with spare masks and fins, but with some basic health monitoring tools and the knowledge to use them.
Precisely. It means instructors need to be proactive. They need to be equipped. And many of these devices, a blood pressure cuff, a thermometer, a pulse oximeter, they're relatively affordable, and the skills are simple to learn. It really emphasizes that ensuring student welfare isn't just about the paperwork up front. It's an ongoing, active responsibility during the entire training process.
This is really hitting home now, just how complex assessing fitness for diving truly is. It leads to the obvious, maybe sobering question: what happens when these assessments or decisions go wrong?
Unfortunately, the consequences can be incredibly serious, even tragic. We have to remember, diving is hazardous. And poor assessments, whether it's the student not being honest, a doctor not understanding the risks, or an instructor missing warning signs or making bad judgments they can and do, lead to severe accidents and fatalities.
You mentioned mental health issues earlier as a potential factor. Is there data linking mental health specifically to diving fatalities?
Yes, if we look at the broader picture, it is a significant concern. For example, a review of Australian diving deaths back in 2012 found that, get this, 9 out of the 11 fatalities involved individuals who either had known mental health issues, were on treatment for them, or admitted afterwards, if they survived, to experiencing panic.
9 out of 11, that's striking.
It is. Another review, this one looking at fatalities across the Asia-Pacific region, showed that the deceased divers took significantly more psychotropic medications compared to control groups. Now, this doesn't prove a direct causal link in every case, of course, but it strongly suggests that underlying psychological or psychiatric conditions may increase the risk of having an accident while diving. Panic, in particular, seems heavily implicated in many diving deaths. It often leads to instinctive but dangerous actions, like bolting for the surface too quickly.
That is a very sobering statistic indeed. Are there specific real-world examples from incident reports that illustrate these kinds of breakdowns in assessment where things went tragically wrong?
Yes. Sadly, there are several well-documented cases that really highlight the critical importance of getting this assessment process right at every stage. First, let's talk about Janet Karen in 2008. He was a 54-year-old man who had declared existing medical conditions, things like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, chronic kidney disease. He declared them on his form. But the dive school failed to follow procedure. They didn't get the required doctor's confirmation of fitness before taking him diving. And tragically, he died after a dive.
What happened to the dive school?
The company faced substantial fines. The instructor involved and the dive school itself were actually expelled from PADI, the training agency. This case clearly shows the serious legal consequences for dive operators if they ignore declared medical issues and the proper procedures. Then there's the case of Julia Brandreth in 1999. She was only 17, doing an advanced open water course. The dive was in Scotland, in cold water with low visibility challenging conditions. The dive plan went wrong, and they ended up descending to 50 meters, which is very deep, far deeper than intended for that type of training dive.
Was she adequately supervised?
Well, there was an instructor and an assistant present, but investigators later deemed the student-to-professional ratio inadequate for those conditions and the depth. A 1.1 ratio was suggested after the fact. Tragically, Julia was found unresponsive at 50 meters. This case really highlights the dangers of choosing inappropriate dive sites for the conditions and the student's skill level, and the critical importance of sufficient supervision, especially when students are still developing skills.
Just terrible. Are there other examples?
Yes, a more recent and widely reported case is Linnea Rose Mills in 2020, an 18-year-old who died during a dry suit certification dive in the U.S. This case involved significant equipment and supervision issues. Reports indicated she was fatally overweighted, using weights that couldn't be easily ditched in an emergency. She apparently didn't even have the inflator hose connected to her dry suit, which is essential for buoyancy control.
So fundamental equipment failures and potentially negligent supervision.
That's what the subsequent lawsuit alleged. It claimed there was a lack of proper pre-dive briefing, inadequate emergency procedures, and generally negligent advice given. Her family eventually settled a $12 million lawsuit against the dive center and Patey. This case is just heartbreaking, and it tragically demonstrates that even if a student has absolutely no underlying medical conditions, they can still be rendered completely unfit to dive simply due to cavalier supervision and dangerous equipment configurations.
These examples are stark reminders of the stakes involved.
Absolutely. If we connect all these threads, assessing fitness for scuba diving emerges as this truly complex, dynamic process. It requires continuous assessment, not just a one-off check. Everyone involved has a critical part to play. The individual diver needs to be honest and self-aware. The doctor providing clearance needs to understand the specific demands of the underwater environment. And the instructor, they need to be knowledgeable about potential medical and psychological issues. They need to perform ongoing risk assessments for each dive, and they need to ensure there's adequate support and supervision for every student, every time.
It's a powerful reminder, isn't it, that safety in any hazardous activity isn't just about ticking boxes on a form. It's about ongoing vigilance, it's about collaboration, and it's about competence at every level. It also really underscores how an individual's specific characteristics, the particular environment of the dive, and the quality of the instruction and guidance all intertwine to define what fit to dive actually means in practice. So, after covering all of this, what's the ultimate takeaway for you, the listener, from this deep dive into dive fitness?
I think it raises an important question, perhaps a challenge for all of us. When you're engaging in, or maybe supervising, any activity that carries inherent risks, not just diving, but anything, how do you personally weigh those subjective factors? Things like human capability, anxiety, environmental variables. How do you weigh those against the more objective assessments, like a medical form? And crucially, what responsibility do you take to continuously reevaluate those risks as things change?
That's definitely something to mull over. A lot to think about until our next deep dive. For now, safe diving.
Well, that ends another podcast. We hope that you now have a better understanding of how fitness to scuba dive assessments are made and what they mean. Next time we will be talking about diving with diabetes. This will cover this topic from both the diver with diabetes point of view, and also from the instructor's perspective. We hope that you will join us for this interesting podcast. Until then, safe diving.